All right, guys, welcome to a special episode of the School Transportation Nation podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing, as well as BYD, committed to empowering education by providing safe, reliable, and clean transportation to your communities, and by School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications. I am live at the STN EXPO in Reno, and I am here with Chris Ellison, the Director of Transportation and Fleet Services for Reynolds School District in Oregon. So thanks for joining us, Chris.
Well, thank you.
Before we jump into the interview, we have a message from our friends at TransFinder.
Guys, have you ever seen a car commercial? They're always saying that the new model is sportier, faster, better. Well, the folks at TransFinder say that's the way to look at their new and improved Service Finder solution. It has the same name, but everything about the new Service Finder is better, faster, sleeker, more intuitive. Service Finder is the next generation of fleet and asset management software. It's browser-based and will make your fleet productive and cost-effective. Service Finder reduces burdensome paperwork, tracks your costs, and will help keep you from missing critical repairs. Let's face it, buses aren't cheap. You need to keep them running efficiently and lasting longer to get the most out of your investment. To learn more about Service Finder, visit transfinder.com or email them at marketing@transfinder.com or give them a call at 800-373-3609. That's 800-373-3609.
All right, Chris. So you actually just started at Reynolds, 2 weeks ago?
That's correct. Yes.
So before you were at David Douglas, also in Oregon. So what is that miles difference? How far away are you?
They are right next door to each other.
So it's just a quick jump.
It is, yes.
Are there any, big changes or differences, from being at David Douglas to Reynolds? Is there any size difference?
Reynolds School District is a little bit bigger, size-wise, fleet size, and employee size as well. So Reynolds School District has roughly 135 vehicles. David Douglas about 100.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a little bit bigger.
What are, some goals or initiatives that you have? I know it's pretty quick turnaround, but are you looking for anything toward the future, any technology adoption?
Well, we currently have one at Reynolds. We currently have one electric bus. So that would be continuing that trajectory, procuring more electric vehicles, and getting more drivers in the seats.
Yeah. How is the driver shortage over there?
You know what? It's actually, I believe, turning a corner. Our school district, Reynolds School District, they just approved a increase in the drivers' wages. So a 15% increase on top of about a 20% increase just about a year ago. So our starting drivers' wages are $26.62, and they top out at $37.92 per hour. So we've been inundated with applications, which is always great, but parsing out those applications is another story. If we really need to, as everybody knows, we really need to get the right people in the seats.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome, though. It sounds like you're getting the people, so that's start one.
Yes, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Mm-hmm. So, also while we're here in Reno, kind of just taking on this new director role, obviously you were a director at David Douglas as well, so it's not too much of a jump there, but you're teaching the So You Want to Be a Transportation Supervisor class, and I know you have a great panelist with you, but what are some takeaways from that? That's going to be tomorrow, so we're recording July 14th, so that's going to be kind of coming up here in the conference. So what are some kind of takeaways or some hot topics that you're going to be touching during that session?
So during that session, it's, when we started this about 6 years ago, I believe, it was about a 3-hour presentation. We've actually expanded that to 5 hours now, from 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock, because there's just so much information, so much just attendee participation, questions, answers, good information. So, what we and my esteemed cohorts, Alex Robinson, Pam McDonald, and this year, Rosalind Van Jackson, it's just the knowledge that is presented is just immeasurable. The one thing that I I always present is how to build a winning team, how to build a winning culture within transportation. So when you are either an established transportation supervisor or going into a new district, just like I just did, or if you're seeking to become a transportation director, a transportation supervisor, and you're kind of, you've grown up through the ranks. What are the inherent challenges? What is it that you need to know? Are you going into a union represented location, or is it not? How do you create the buy-in from your drivers and from district leadership for what you want your vision to be for that location? Because everybody has, dreams. Everybody has, what their vision, what they want that to look like. But how do you pull that off? Especially when you're quote unquote the new guy, and why should I listen to this new guy? He may just have, or he or she may just have the title, but what can you bring to the table so that you create that buy-in? Because it starts with that.
Mm-hmm. And are you going to be drawing on your personal experience as well, quote unquote, being this new guy at Reynolds?
Absolutely. And it's fun. I mean, there's always stress and everything, starting a new job and getting to know, 120 new people and everything. But I really enjoy meeting new people. I enjoy the challenge that's presented, and there are inherent challenges. I mean, it could be a budget issues. It could be obviously staffing issues, which hits all of us. So that challenge, I welcome it. I tackle it, and you know what? Bottom line, it doesn't matter if you're at District A, District B, or District C. We're all in this together, and we all have the same challenges.
Well, speaking of challenges, we're going to jump into the diesel challenges here in a second.
Yes.
But first, we have a message from our sponsor.
Got a message from BYD, our title sponsor at the Green Bus Summit. BYD Ride is committed to empowering education by providing safe, reliable, and clean transportation to our communities. The Achiever, BYD's Type A battery electric school bus, will be available to experience at the Ride and Drive. The Achiever can reduce our carbon footprint, eliminate pollutants, and create better air quality for future generations. Equipped with the latest technology, including V2G and anti-collision software, the Achiever is eligible for EPA Clean School Bus Program and many other state and local incentives. To learn more, go to ride.co. That's ride.co to learn more.
All right. So you mentioned, jumping into the new challenges and your feet first in that, right?
Yes.
So with Oregon, I believe you guys are following the California Air Resources Board in terms of emission requirements.
That is correct.
So what does that kind of look like for you guys in the future of diesel at Reynolds?
Well, it's not just my school district, but every school district in Oregon. Oregon adopted the CARB requirements to a T. And what that means is as of January 1st of 2024, diesel-powered buses cannot be sold in the state of Oregon. So it must be either gas-powered, propane-powered, or electric powered. So that presents an inherent issue and a huge obstacle for just about every school district in Oregon. There are a few school districts that have jumped headfirst into electrification and have been very successful at it, but the vast majority have not because of funding issues. Not only for the charging infrastructure, and yes, there's grants out there, but the grants are few and far between. A lot of them are competitive grants at that. And then there's the equipment cost, aside from the infrastructure cost. So, the one thing that is presenting the biggest challenge is it's just the overall challenge. It's not a turnkey operation with electrification. And everybody is talking electric, electric, electric. I firmly believe electric is the future of school bus transportation. However, getting to that point is the biggest challenge. What we're talking about is it takes, on average, about a year to get everything on your lot if you're just starting, the initial conversations with your public utility, and then drawing the power in from the street, getting the charging equipment, procuring the school bus equipment, which, as everybody knows, that there's been chain supply issues and everything. So it's been very, very challenging. And for Oregon to adopt this requirement verbatim, it's going to be interesting. And I've had a few conversations with Oregon DEQ, basically asking the tough questions. And I'm asking from the end user standpoint, not the sales standpoint. So I don't represent the engine manufacturers. I obviously represent the school bus user position there. So in Oregon and in California, City Transit has received a waiver from this requirement. Okay, so they can still purchase diesel. However, part of that is as they purchase diesel, those diesel purchases have to be offset with zero emission purchases as well. So for instance, there's caps that have been set for 2024. 55% of the vehicles that are purchased in the state must be zero emission vehicles. In 2025, that bumps up to 75% must be zero emission. Oregon adopted that. I think it's from the outside looking in, hey, great. But from the end user standpoint, we're talking about possibly, students may not be getting to school because Oregon is not set up for electric, and especially our very rural school districts. It's just really, really tough to pull the trigger on the funding and what it would cost for the infrastructure and the school bus itself. Mm-hmm. I asked the tough questions in our meeting. We've got three very large or larger city transit operators. In the Portland area, it's TriMet. They have approximately 700 buses. In Eugene, they have Lane Transit District, which they have approximately 100 buses. And then in the Salem area, they have their transit agency is called Chariots, and they have approximately 65 buses. So that's about 865 city transit buses in the state. By my guess, there's probably another 100 or so with smaller communities that run their city transit. So maybe roughly 1,000. There are just under 6,000 school buses in the state of Oregon. And my question was, well, if city transit got a waiver, why wouldn't school buses get a waiver? And yes, again, electric, I feel, as everybody, most people do, is the future. It is. But to be very quick to pull the trigger on this requirement is going to be very, very challenging. So yeah, some tough questions were asked. I just received an email from DEQ this last week asking for more information. So my hope is that, and at the end of our meetings, I respectfully requested a waiver on behalf of the state of Oregon. As in my position, I am the past president of Oregon Pupil Transportation Association. So on behalf of OPTA, respectfully requesting that waiver. And they took all my information into consideration, and now they're asking for more information. So hopefully that might be gaining some traction on that. So that's what the elimination of diesel buses. We're I hate to say we're driving towards that proverbial cliff, but we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's some good news that you put in that waiver. So I know probably all the Oregon districts listening are fingers crossed. You have a little bit more leeway.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so because, I'm not just speaking for Reynolds School District. I'm not speaking for David Douglas School District. I'm speaking for, all school districts. And it's a choice. It's a choice whether you purchase gas, propane, diesel or electric, so it comes down to the choice, but we do have our responsibility as well, both for the environment, but also as public stewards of public money as well.
So let's just play the what if game for a second. If this waiver, doesn't get passed in favor of school districts, what would that look like? Are you guys going to be buying, a bunch of diesel buses, or have you already purchased a bunch of diesel buses, waiting for that deadline?
Well, our vendors in the state of Oregon, school bus vendors, have actually, how do I say this? I don't want to say tapped out the supply, but they have ordered an inordinate amount of diesel school buses. But the way that the requirement is written is you must take delivery by January 1 of 2024. January 2 comes around, you can't take delivery, which I kind of find hard to believe that Oregon DEQ would how should I say this? Not enforce it, but be so draconian that you have this $170,000 diesel school bus that you've been waiting almost a year to take delivery. Stuff happens, stuff happens on with supply issues that they wouldn't. Oh, you're 1 day late. Sorry, send it back to the manufacturer or to the East Coast or wherever diesels are allowed now. I don't know, but I would find it very hard to believe. But when that day comes, what it's going to look like is many of our school districts are going to be holding on to older diesel buses that are much more dirty, I should say, than the diesels that are being produced today. It's just a fact.
Mm-hmm. So what is your guys' fleet makeup right now? Just really quickly before I let you go.
Oh, sure. Our fleet, actually, we have a very, very green fleet. About 70% of our school buses of our fleet are propane powered. And then again, we have one electric right now. And then the rest are a combination of gas and diesel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you definitely still have some diesel. So you'll.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And diesel, it's the range of the vehicle that we have to have. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon for us to go on a 400 to 500 mile trip in one day. So Oregon is a very rural state, and the way that the sports groupings are made up, we travel long distances.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate you coming on and
Absolutely.
chatting
My
with
pleasure.
us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to have you at Reno too. So I'm sure we'll see you around.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, is reliable radio and communications important to you? Got a message from School Radio. The laws against using cell phones while operating commercial vehicles are in place for the safety and security of both your school bus drivers and your students. Taking that risk comes with a hefty fine, penalties, and even the disqualification of the CDL of the driver. School Radio specializes in providing wide area push-to-talk two-way radio solutions for schools and school transportation that are fully compliant with all hands-free operational laws. They offer a managed service program, which includes the device, all services, all maintenance at a fixed monthly budget point. No expense infrastructure or FCC license is required. Get a demo today by visiting school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com. All right, guys. Live at STN EXPO. My voice is, tested a little bit, but we're having a great time. Wonderful time here in Reno, Nevada. I have a special guest with me, sat on my Future of Tech panel, Mr. Ben Englander, President CEO of Rosco Vision Systems. Ben, welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Great to be with you.
Awesome. So we just had a great panel, Ben, packed house, lots of discussion about where school transportation is going in the area of technology. And Rosco Vision Systems has always been kind of an agent of change. You've been pushing the limits of technology, doing things at shows. I remember years ago, you had a bus with the windows all blacked out, and everybody was just like, oh my God, what is happening with this bus? And you've evolved as a company significantly with some very cool innovations around safety, particularly. And I wanted to just dive in with you a little bit on how you really see technology, the evolution of it as it's progressed over the years. And you've got a few years under your belt at Rosco Vision Systems, and kind of walk us through what you've seen and what's kind of brought you to some of the innovations that you're landing on today.
Wow. Well, thanks, Tony. That was a long sort of opening. First of all, I want to thank you for hosting a great panel discussion today. I thought it was super informative, and there was an interesting variety, both of the topics you brought up and the content that was discussed at the panel, coming from different perspectives of the individuals, including myself, that were there. So I just want to congratulate you on really setting up a great panel discussion. And you could tell because there were a lot of folks in the room and everybody seemed to be interested. So we've always taken an approach as Rosco that we are an equipment company and we make products for buses. But we like to view ourselves, as moving forward on what technology within the equipment space can look like. And it, obviously started with mirrors for us, mirrors and sun visors. But as you said, we, even as much as 15, 20 years ago, we were looking, okay, how would a bus look if it only had cameras on it and no mirrors and other types of technologies? And those openings have led to where we are today with some of our technologies like DCAMs, digital camera and monitoring system, that is an e-mirror product for the purposes of eliminating the rear view mirrors in favor of cameras and monitors for the driver. So yes, we've taken the approach of, okay, what can we do with equipment that'll make the world of the driver safer and easier on a bus? And, that's just one example of how, working from an equipment perspective, what can be done to sort of change the way the school bus looks, the way the school bus operates. And we've, of course, taken different approaches with camera systems from a recording perspective. As you heard this morning Vivek from Zoom talk about how they're utilizing camera technology to help make their drivers better and safer with coaching. And that's what we've been doing for a long time with our dual vision camera systems, utilizing AI and really superior recording technology to monitor drivers, to give them alerts of what's coming on the road. So yeah, that's kind of what we've done, as staying within our roots, which is providing technology in the form of equipment to the industry, but advancing it forward and further to enhance and incorporate more and more technology.
Can you walk us through DCAMs? And I know you got a federal waiver, and that was a very long process. And really, what is that product? And what is it really, the benefits of it? Why should I change from mirrors?
So that's a great question. And you're right, it was a long road. We started on this several years ago to develop an e-mirror, a camera and monitor system in place of conventional mirrors. And the purpose of the product is exactly what it sounds like. When it comes to a rear view mirror, you're fairly limited by geometry and the environment of the driver as to where you can put those mirrors and what the driver would need to see. When it comes to cameras and monitors, you can put a monitor anywhere in the cockpit around the driver that makes sense for the driver to look at, but might be better placed so it does not create any sort of forward blind spots. And you can mount cameras on the exterior of the vehicle in low-profile locations, so they're far less prone to being struck by an object or getting in the way. So the e-mirror technology is incredible enhancement on driver vision for the purposes of safer operation. So if you can imagine, if a mirror might be a challenge to use at night when the environment around the vehicle is dark, and perhaps the driver at best can see, for instance, headlamps of vehicles behind, right? When you have a camera system with a sophisticated sensor, like a CMOS sensor, and which is capable of viewing the environment as low as a half a lux, which is basically darkness to the naked eye, and picking up tremendous amounts of light, that just makes the operation of the vehicle that much safer for the driver, because they can see what's behind them and around them much more clearly. A camera can give you a wider angle than a conventional mirror can, and so oncoming vehicles along the side are much more visible to the driver. Mirrors have a tendency to, get wet in rain, and sometimes droplets of water remain on the mirror. Well, these cameras are protected, so there's no sort of weather challenges that you might see with mirrors. A driver has to look through his windshield and his windows to get to see the mirrors, but the monitors are inside the vehicle, so the view is clean and unobstructed and without any sort of debris that you might see on a mirror. So there's so many reasons why this technology is superior to mirrors, and we've seen a lot of significant organizations embrace e-mirrors. And you mentioned the exemption process was long, working with the FMCSA. They've only exempted, I think, a total of 3 or 4 companies totally in our industry for this technology. And it took quite a while. It really did take quite a while to get through all the processes of approval, but we got there. And this enables fleets to apply DCAMs or an e-mirror and remove their mirrors and operate without conventional mirrors, as long as they are a fleet that is under the auspices of the federal government, like a DOT fleet that goes from state to state with interstate commerce. Then they are governed by the federal DOT, and they have a DOT sticker. Those fleets can operate without mirrors and using a product like DCAMs, like an e-mirror.
Talk about the cost-benefit analysis, because I know in the panel you said that they reduced drag and you gain fuel efficiency. Can you expand on that?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So it is a major factor with a product like an e-mirror that you no longer have the larger exterior mirrors that create obstruction, can create drag for the vehicle. So studies have shown that up to 2 to 3% drag is eliminated by an e-mirror versus a conventional mirror. So if you think about that as that translates to either fuel efficiency or, for the purposes of an EV, general range, if you can increase range by reducing drag by 2 to 3%, that's an enormous factor. When it comes to internal combustion vehicles, if you think about the fuel savings by reducing drag, it's very, very meaningful. So while an e-mirror might be a more expensive product than a conventional mirror, it can probably get fuel savings payback within 1 to 2 years on some vehicles that are particularly driving at over the road higher speeds, where wind drag becomes a big issue. And even in pupil transportation, while many school buses operate in urban environments sort of point to point without a great deal of speed, in many parts of the country, school buses operate at meaningful speed where wind drag becomes an issue, and e-mirrors can begin to pay for themselves even in pupil transportation.
So let's talk about safety a little more. You talked a little bit earlier about the conversation in the panel, which was about monitoring drivers. And you can lens a couple different ways, right? That could be corrective behavior, coaching, or punitive bad behavior, looking at a cell phone. Can you talk a little more to that product and the acceptance in the school bus industry and some of the benefits that are being achieved in that area of safety?
So yeah, I wanted to bring that up because we find this notion of driver coaching and this concept of the term you brought up, punitive, and I know Vivek brought that up for the purposes of coaching. We find that the technologies we offer, particularly with Dual Vision, our recording system that has driver monitoring, DMS built in, and also forward ADAS built in, and the technologies like Mobileye with ADAS, the technologies themselves do the coaching of the drivers, because when a system alerts the driver to a headway, for instance, right? A headway warning. You're too close. You're tailgating the vehicle in front of you. Drivers tend to adjust their behavior, and it's self-modifying. So it isn't like a punitive system with drivers, right? I mean, obviously a collision avoidance system at its extreme can go to the point of preventing a complete forward collision. And that needs to be discussed if there are a lot of forward collision warnings that a driver is experiencing, because that would mean that the driver is operating at a fairly risky behavior, and that was where coaching might come in. But something like headway, as an example, where a driver would be getting a chime if, let's say, he or she allows his or her vehicle to get, let's say, within half a second of following distance over a period of time, the system's saying, hey, you're getting close to tailgating, I'm going to give you a chime. And the drivers will get used to not, they don't want to hear that chime. So they begin to provide safer distances, safer following distances between them and the vehicle in front. So it's sort of a self-coaching system. It isn't punitive. It reminds the driver. Lane departure warnings, for an example, right? If a driver begins to change lanes without signaling, the system is going to give a chime. And drivers will begin to sort of self-regulate and begin to use their turn signals and change lanes more appropriately. So much of these technologies, for instance, if a driver is somewhat, let's just say, distracted, right? And a driver monitoring system like Rosco's product will give a small chime to the driver that says something along the lines of distraction detected, right? I have it in my car, actually. I have a Rosco dual vision, and every once in a while it reminds me that I'm looking at my radio to change the station, or I'm not keeping my eyes on the road. And guess what? I learn to behave, so to speak, and I am reminded that I was distracted. So it isn't always about only sort of punishing the drivers. The drivers moderate their own practice by virtue of this built-in coaching tool within the technology.
Now, do you see other things like haptics on steering wheels? We see that in consumer automobiles. You touched on obviously going with a DCAM. I know in my car, when I'm changing lanes, I look at the mirror and there's a light that indicates if there's another vehicle beside me. Now, I haven't really seen that necessarily in commercial vehicles, but since you're the mirror manufacturer and you're innovating, do you see that technology making a natural transition into the fleet side of the business?
Sure, that's a great question. And we are actually working with a number of the OEMs on blind spot detection with an icon in the mirror. I don't want to speak out of turn because these are projects that are in the works, and until the OEM releases them, I would be uncomfortable speaking about them. But we are working on blind spot detection, or commonly known as BLIS, where you have an icon in the mirror, so that would give you blind spot detection if, let's say, the operator, the driver wants to change lanes and there's a vehicle alongside. We are actually working to incorporate the blind spot detection within the DCAM's product, so the icon would appear in the monitor. That is to be released soon from us. So yes, blind spot detection is something that you brought up that is going to be available for these types of vehicles as well. And object detection as well within DCAM. So it won't only be necessarily vehicles, it can be a cyclist, which is becoming more and more popular. Well, it's very common in Europe, right? So cyclist detection, there's a whole standard within Europe called the R151, which is a cyclist detection standard that products like DCAMs or other technologies need to incorporate as a rule. And here in the United States, as cyclists become more ubiquitous, and you could imagine a circumstance where a cyclist pulls up alongside a long vehicle like a school bus, and the school bus intends to turn, and the cyclist is there. Having that type of detection show up in your mirror or your e-mirror, your DCAMs, is critical. So we are working on that as well.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I almost see it too with an application potentially with student identification. And I know we talked about AI, and unfortunately, the reality is student dragging happens. Backpacks get caught indoors and the driver drives off. You're like, how could they not see that child? Do you see the potential of object detection being actually a child maybe being dragged? I mean, does it have the potential application to solve that problem? Because many districts come to me saying, I need a solution. How do I solve this problem?
Yeah, so we have a number of solutions that we are introducing to the market. So we have Mobileye Shield Plus, which is already a in-the-market solution, particularly for the transit industry and the waste industry, that has a camera at the rear on each side of the vehicle. And that camera is a Mobileye camera that can detect a human, or in the case, a child being, running alongside, so to speak, being dragged, where the technology would pick that child up. It's a fairly sophisticated technology that has become very popular in the transit marketplace. We've brought it to the attention of the school bus marketplace, but it's not an inexpensive technology. And it hasn't really picked up sort of momentum, but we are gaining some interest now recently with Mobileye Shield Plus. There's a program in, I believe, the state of Georgia to subsidize collision avoidance technology for buses. And in some areas, we've had good discussions on implementing that type of detection on a school bus. And we are also incorporating that technology as an object detection integration with DCAMs. So we are working towards that, and that type of technology would, in our opinion, detect a child stuck in the door because it's specifically programmed to detect the human form better than any other product in the marketplace. So we are working on that, and we're also working to try to bring down the cost of that type of technology to make it more fitting for the school bus industry.
So to kind of conclude the conversation, what do you see as being the future technology on the school bus as an innovator in the market? And there's many products you just talked about that enhance safety. And it's such a mission-driven industry around safety. How do you see the evolution of the school bus in the future? And what can we expect from Rosco?
So that's a great question. Again, there are so many technologies that are developing for school transportation. And if we speak about what we heard in the panel this morning, some of the most sophisticated technologies are in the operation of the vehicle and the fleets that we heard about from Zoom and from Transfinder. But when it comes to the actual vehicle, I think we can expect to see a lot more sensor technology on and around the vehicle. Cameras, LiDAR, radar, a lot of what you see, for instance, on the autonomous taxis that are starting to come out from Waymo, right? And Uber's working now with them. And all the autonomous vehicles that are being developed now are pretty much loaded with fusions of sensors, cameras, LiDAR, radar that make the life of the operator that much easier. So even if we don't get to full autonomy with these school buses for quite some time, and I think it's going to be, as I mentioned this morning, quite a while till you see autonomous school buses, the fact that we can put into the driver's hands sophisticated technology, even active technology, as we heard, things like Bendix Wingman that we mentioned that IC is offering. I think the other bus manufacturers are also offering that type of automation, that type of automatic emergency braking. Technologies like stop arm cameras that are going to also do a lot to help stop drivers passing and motorists passing buses with their stop arms out, with their loading and during loading and unloading. They're all based on sensors. They're all based on cameras. Cameras are essentially a sensor. They're vision sensors or radar sensors. I know Thomas has a student detection system that's based on radar. LiDAR, which is a more expensive sensing technology, but is making its way into vehicles. I think you're going to see much more of that, along with a lot of other technologies. As I mentioned, there's technologies that are being developed now to detect the students within the bus, right? So if you have a sleeping child, if you have a child under a jacket, there are sophisticated technologies that are coming out, and we've got a few on the drawing board to detect students in the vehicle. So there's a lot that is based on sensor technology being added to buses to both make the operational environment easier and safer, and obviously to make a much safer solution both for the students. And as I mentioned today, remember, the buses have to operate in complex environments. There are lots of other vehicles around. There are lots of other environmental challenges. So we focus on child safety, but at the end of the day, as I said, if a bus driver sort of zones out for a second and rolls into a car at a stop sign, right? That's a collision, and we can prevent that. So a lot of focus is on student safety, but I think we also have to focus on the drivers, the bus environment and the operational environment that they work in to make sure that we don't allow any collision of any type to happen with buses.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and expertise. We really appreciate Rosco Vision Systems, and we hope you have a very successful STN Expo with us.
Thank you so much, Tony. And again, kudos on running a wonderful program, a great expo and summit. We really thrilled to be part of it.
Wonderful. All right, guys, special thanks to Ben, Chris, and Taylor for joining this special edition of the STN podcast. We also appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder, BYD Ride, and School Radio. Visit stnonline.com for all the conference coverage this week, as well as everything you need to know about the school transportation industry. Nation, don't forget to subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. We love you. We'll see you next week.